Hello. Um, Here we are. Thoughts on Jojo's Bizarre Adventure Part 3, having finished reading it. Quite a long time ago, actually. Over a week ago. But I just haven't had the opportunity to record anything for a week. So forgive me if my memory's a little bit foggy. But it should be better than last time, because I haven't started Part 4 yet. I'm about to start it. Probably today. Um, and yeah. In the time, I have thought of some ideas to make this a little bit better than the last video, uh, which I felt I was sort of going off track a lot. I lost the structure a bit, and it wasn't that nice to follow upon watching it back, so I've written down everything I want to talk about in the order I want to talk about it this time. Um, so hopefully it'll be a bit better to watch. Um, So yeah, I mean overall, I thought this was definitely the strongest um, out of the three parts I've read so far. It felt the most. It felt like it had the most personality, um, and it really felt like I've forgotten his name again. The manga really came into his own on this one, especially. It was really fun, um, and really unique in a lot of ways, but of course also not unique in a lot of ways. It reminded me a lot of old cartoons, more than the first two parts did. It reminded me of stuff like that I read as a child, like Asterix and Tintin, which I thought was really interesting. Um, in terms of the way it's sort of structured very episodically, one thing happens, then they go to the next location, and another thing happens, and there's a lot of sort of the enemy failing in a comedic way, and the protagonists not even really realizing that they're beating the enemy while they're doing whatever else they're doing. Um, but yeah, general structure. This one is more of a journey. Obviously, there was traveling was a part of the first two parts, but it was more of a necessity just to switch things up. But this is much more focused on an actual tour of South Asia and the Middle East, from Japan to Egypt, stopping off at locations. There's an enemy there that Dio, who's back, has sent. They deal with that enemy, unbeknownst to them sometimes, and then they move on. That's the structure. It is a little bit repetitive, especially towards sort of the 2/3 mark, maybe. I don't know. I can't really tell in my head now how quickly it takes for them to actually arrive in Egypt, because they're in Egypt for quite a long time. So, but the stuff in like Dubai and in the desert is, I was maybe getting a little bored. But other than that, I thought it was pretty well structured. It works. It's great. And it helps that there is a real good core team of six really good characters. I found all of them to be entertaining. I wanted them all to succeed. I wanted them all to get through the adventure, even if not all of them did. Which was very sad. I felt that the deaths in this part had a lot more oomph to them, even if they weren't treated necessarily perfectly all of the time. But in terms of the crew, first person to talk about is Joseph, because he's back from part two, except now he's a grandfather. He's a very different character, which of course makes sense. Do I like him as much? Not really, but I still like him plenty, and it makes up for the fact that Jojo and some of the other characters here are even better than he was as a youth. They're more entertaining to watch. But he's not my favorite. He's nowhere near my favorite out of this six person, I guess. not really 6-person crew. Um, his stand is very good as well. I should talk about those. The stands are all across the board great. I think that they're really fun. They're better than the powers from the first two parts, for sure. Super enjoyable. His stand is kind of cool. It's not my favorite stand, but it's better than some of the stands in this group of six. Just the thorns, pretty cool. One thing I didn't like was that Joseph, did have a remark which really just came off to me as weird about Indian people. I can't remember precisely what it was, unfortunately, but it just really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think there was an attempt to go back on it and maybe indicate that he was being wrong for being an old man, but it was still a weird decision to me because he's definitely a very kind person. I don't see why he wouldn't be tolerant of Indian people. Very strange. Um, but other than that, he's fine. He's cool. I wish there was less of a focus on him though, for some of it. And then Jojo, who I guess we got Jojo number 3, and really the closest thing to a protagonist. He's the one who defeats Dio. He has the strongest stand, for sure. It's just insane. I thought he was really entertaining. And they managed to make another unique Jojo. They all are clearly similar, but also very decisively different. It's very well done in that regard. But yeah, he's definitely more nonchalant than the first two JoJos. And because obviously it's split between 6, he does get less of a focus, but I feel like he gets the right amount. Him and Joseph both get about the same amount of focus. I would say he deserves it, and Joseph maybe doesn't as much. Very entertaining, and the design as well. His design is just amazing. He looks so cool. Yeah, big fan of that. Then we got Avdol. I really liked him. I really liked him a lot. Thought he was an important part of the group because he is by far the most sensible person, and sort of the most level-headed. Even Jojo maybe isn't as level-headed as Avdol. Some of the time, or at least he's not as much of like a voice of reason, even if he is as level-headed, because he doesn't really say anything some of the time. Jojo is just sort of there. Avdol seems like he's always contributing, except when he's not there because he's injured, and they pretend as if he's died. And it did get me. I did think he had died, and I was pretty sad because I did really like him already, and he died not even halfway through the story. This first fake death, at least, wasn't even halfway through the story. He does die as well. In the penultimate sort of fight. But yeah, I thought he was great. I really like his stand. These first 3 have really good stands. I'm a big fan of all of those stands. The sort of fire powers are just cool, and sort of Firebird. It's not really a phoenix. It's just sort of a Firebird. It's always cool to see. So yeah. And also, I don't know if this is something a lot of people would care about, but I was very happy to see a very neutral depiction of a person of color. And by I mean a person of not Asian or white, I guess, in this case, in a manga, because there often is not brilliant depictions of them in these stories, and that was pretty great as well. So yeah, big fan of that. Love Avdol, rest in peace, and rest in peace as well to Kakyoin, who was probably my favorite of the 6. Excuse me, I need a drink. probably my favorite. And it's a shame because, except for Iggy, he's probably the least focused on. He's just sort of around a lot of the time. Him and Polnareff are both originally presented as enemies, and then they quickly like come around and team up with the gang. Um, and I feel like after Polnareff did the exact same thing as Kakyoin, he kind of took over the story in that regard of the sort of redemption arc idea. So Kakyoin was just sort of around for quite a lot of it. Um, he does have the one encounter with the baby, which I thought was good. But the issue I had with that is that it was it was one of the least interesting enemy stand users. I'll get to that in a bit. This baby who can infiltrate your dreams. It's a very interesting concept, but it just doesn't feel like anything is done with it. And that was really the only time he was like the main focal character with no one else really backing him up. He was the most important of the six there, and that was sort of it. And also he's taken out in the Egypt part, whereas that's where Alvdo comes back, which is the most pivotal part of the story, and he's not even there for a good chunk of it, which sucks. So I'm not happy with how he was handled, but personality-wise, he's the most enjoyable personality for me. I really enjoyed him. And Polnareff, I wish he got less of a focus, but I didn't dislike him. It almost feels like, especially before they get to Egypt, that he is more focused on than Jojo, and I didn't like that at all. Because I don't like him as a person that much compared to a lot of the other people in this group. Because he's very sort of cocky and self-absorbed a bit. He's not to an annoying degree, I guess, but but he's not as likable because of it. He gets a lot of the good sort of encounters early on, and thankfully they do pay it off, of course, since he's the one who survives the Vanilla Ice fight. And that almost does work as a completion of his story. So I understand the focus on him, since he's one of the people to live at the end. Yeah, I guess I've almost changed my mind a bit there, but I still wish he was focused on a little bit less. I wish we got a bit more Kakyo in, maybe a bit more Avdol as well. Um, Especially since both of them get taken out of the story for parts, and even when they're in the story, it feels like they get less of a focus than Polnareff, which is annoying, because you could focus on Polnareff while they're not there, you know? And then finally we've got Iggy, who shows up very near the end, and he's a dog. So he can't talk, but we do get thought bubbles while he's not with anyone else, which happens a couple of times. He has one particular moment where it's just him versus this bird who has a stand as well. Oh, excuse me. And that was honestly one of the best fights in the whole manga. I really enjoyed it, and I thought Iggy was really he was entertaining. I was worried at first when he showed up. I was worried I wouldn't enjoy him, but he sort of redeems himself very quickly. He becomes very entertaining, and he dies. They kill a dog, this sort of happy dog. Well, he's not very happy, but they kill a dog, and I wasn't expecting that at all. That really did surprise me. But yeah, probably my least favorite of the six, but that's sort of inevitable because he's not in it as much as the others. He only shows up at the end. So yeah, I guess the journey, I don't have that much more to say about it. I'm not sure why I wrote it. I wrote this out right after I finished it, so there must have been something I was planning on talking about, but I don't know what it was. But I guess I can talk about some of the locations and stuff. I don't know. But yeah. In terms of enemy stand users, there's a mix of genuinely threatening people, or people who make themselves known, and people who are just embarrassingly bad and fail miserably, and it's very funny. Um, and both type of enemy has its best and its worst. There are some encounters, especially at the beginning before they get to like India, which are very forgettable. Like thinking on it, there's like a like little trap like guy who tries to kill Polnareff in his hotel. I can't tell you any more than that. I only remember a very vague amount. There's like a bug guy. Oh, there's that. There's the orangutan. I completely forgot about. Yeah, quite a few of them at the beginning. Completely slip out of your mind by the end. There are so many. That's the other thing to note. Really, is that there are a lot of enemies, but there are also some really good ones. I really like the old woman whose son was one of the enemies before, and she shows up to stop them. I can't even really remember what her powers were, but I just remember it's funny because she had to hide a corpse from everyone, from the other like four people who were there at the time, and that was just kind of funny. In terms of the comedy, though, I think the pinnacle would have to be Oingo and Boingo, who are two of the very last section because the first section, excuse me. Um, the first part before Egypt, each enemy is based off a tarot card, and that includes Kakyoin and Polnareff. And then they ran out of tarot cards, so they had to move to Egyptian gods to drag the story out. Oingo and Boingo are both gods, I'm pretty sure. Um, they're very near the end, and they have an interesting set of powers. I don't remember which way round they are. One of them is a guy, like a regular guy, and the other one's his little brother, who must be about 10. But the little boy has a picture book, and whatever appears in the picture book, the actual image, will that exact image will exist in the real world within a short span of time from when it appears in the book. I don't really I don't think it's being drawn in by the kid. I don't think that's the implication. I think the book does what it wants by itself. But first of all, the power itself is really cool, and I like the fact that he doesn't have control over the book, or at least it's implied that he doesn't. Rather than he's just some sort of like god. I kind of hate that sort of god like he can create reality power sometimes, and I think it really wouldn't have worked here. So I really like that it was sort of out of his control. It was just always sort of favorable to him. And his brother has like a face. He can change his face to look like anyone else, which backfires because he ends up looking like one of the people in the image. So he ends up becoming one of the people in one of the images where he's supposed to be Jojo, and then he like blows himself up, and it's very funny. I did laugh. It's probably the only point where I really was laughing out loud at any point in the read. That's not a bad thing. I'm not a sort of laugh out loud guy. Um, but yeah, really funny. And then he comes back later to help out Whole Horse, who is a sort of recurring enemy because he keeps pussying out of actually fighting the main group. Because his power is pretty weak. He has a one bullet gun and he can control where the bullet goes. Um, I think it must be like 6 or 8 bullets, but he only ever shoots them one at a time. Um, and it's not particularly effective. It's only a bullet, I guess. It's sort of the implication. But anyway, they team up and it backfires again. I'm pretty sure because Whole Horse's watch is wrong or something, which was yeah. Also very funny. It wasn't as funny as the first time, but yeah, that was definitely the funniest of the stand users. As for the most serious threat, aside from Dio himself, I've got to talk about Vanilla Ice. So he is the second to last person. He is one of the sort of 4 stand users, including the bird, other than Dio who's in Dio's house when they go to Dio's house. There's also the bird who I already talked about fights Iggy. That's great. There's then this like guy who makes them play video games, and I was not particularly enticed by it, but I didn't hate it. And then there was like a third guy who was basically just there for comedic purposes because he was defeated in about a second, which was really funny. Um, and his name's also something. There's a lot of artists of the time who get names after them, characters named after them in this. His name was what was it? Kenny G. His name was Kenny G, which I just thought was hilarious for like so many reasons, right? Anyway, but then Vanilla Ice, because of course the most dastardly artist of his time, comes in. I mean, he kills more people than Dio, because Dio technically kills Joseph, but then he's like revived. Um, Vanilla Ice kills Avdol and Iggy, and Dio only kills Kakyoin. So he actually gets a higher kill count, which is insane. And also his power is like ridiculous. He can sort of shoot out beams which send you to basically nothingness, which is obviously essentially killing you. And he has to be beaten by Polnareff, who I completely forgot to talk about the stand of. Polnareff and Kakyoin stands. I completely forgot. They're both not very interesting to me. Kakyoin's was kind of interesting, but they're both just sort of humans who are considerably weaker than Jotaro's stand, who's also a human. So I wasn't really into them. I wish they were a bit more unique, really. Anyway, Polnareff ends up winning because Iggy sacrifices himself. It's a really good fight. It's probably better than the Dio fight because the power is more interesting than Dio's. I know that some people might be like, huh? I'm not sure what general consensus is on this. But I don't really mind Dio's power, but like time stopping isn't the most interesting thing in the world to me. Whereas Vanilla Ice has a kind of unique power, and he uses it in a unique way as well. He has a kind of unique move that he uses at the end, in desperation, really. Um, and the threat there felt much greater because I just couldn't see Jotaro losing as well. Is the issue? He was just so strong, which is cool. But it does mean that Vanilla Ice feels like the bigger threat because Jotaro's not there. And then Dio, he's back. Ooh. But he's not in it very much. He shows up a couple times in sort of cutbacks to what the villains are planning type of things. And he doesn't seem that like he's not that interesting, any of those, and they're really rare. They only happen about 3 times. I do like him in them. Then when he shows up, his design is magnificent. He's definitely got the best design in the manga so far. And he's got the power to stop time for 5 seconds, which is obviously a weird way of putting it because obviously time is stopped. But he can hold the time stop for 5 of another time's seconds. I don't know how else to explain it, but it makes sense. It's a good limiter to make it so he can't just stop time indefinitely, which would obviously be terrible. And it's certainly a threatening power because it does immediately seem as though it's something that Jotaro's stand can't beat. Because the whole point of Jotaro's stand really is that it's just incredibly fast. But he ends up being that Jotaro can also stop time somehow. And I understand. I don't see how else you could write in a way of defeating Dio here. Like, it makes sense. But yeah, I did just feel like Vanilla Ice was the more threatening of the final 2 enemies in this, which is a shame because it's definitely not what's supposed to seem the case, like structurally. Um, and of course I didn't hate Dio, but I did feel like part one Dio had more of like, and I had more of an understanding of him. Um, he doesn't feel like he feels very samey to what he felt like at the end of part one, and I would have expected more of a change to have occurred because I'm sort of assuming he was conscious the whole like 100 years. That he was like under the sea or whatever. Not to mention, he's got to adjust to this whole new world system. I mean, we're in the modern day now, or what was the modern day when it was being written. Um, yeah, maybe was hoping for a bit more. Maybe I'm hoping for too much, but either way, I did enjoy it. I thought it was fun. I'm excited for part four. I'd give it a 6 out of 10, same as part 2, but it's much closer to a 7 than part 2. Part 2 is more like a 5. Well, no, it's just 6, but it's closer to a 5. It's definitely better than part 2. I'm excited for part 4. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.